Good morning, everyone. I'm using this microphone partly because I like to prowl up and down, but also because I like to just point at things. And there'll be some graphs and things that, well, we'll come to this. So the story of the research. Once upon a time, about 2 years ago, a nice company, very nice organisation, gave us a whole lot of money and said, go and do this project. And so we did this project, and it's been great fun. But as with all kind of responsibilities, we need to demonstrate exactly what our project has achieved. So this is what I'm going to be talking about now. Technology. Good. Background. Okay, so the thinking behind the ACE project. Janja talked a little bit about this a moment ago. It was really motivated by a recognition that friendship is a very important thing for all of us. And we know that one of the features of the spectrum is that people find friendships difficult. Finding friends, maintaining friendships. And we also know that by and large, or evidence in the past has suggested that people on the spectrum find online environment less anxiety-provoking than face-to-face very often. We brought all of these things together and tried to use virtual environments, online environments, to create friendship connections and then maintain them over time. And hopefully also, therefore, improve psychological health. Now, this was in many ways a very ambitious project, bringing together individuals from 4 different countries and going through a process, which is what the group ultimately was, a process of trying to develop friendships. So what we wanted to do was have a research plan that reflected the complexity of this. We put together a series of measures and used them at the start of the project, midway through the project, and then at the end of the project. And in general, our hope was that we would see these developments, this progression from time 1 to time 3. We're also very aware that the sample would be relatively small. And for those of you in the room that are psychologists, statisticians, sociologists, you know that there is sometimes a problem with small samples. And so we developed a qualitative measure as well that we gave to the parents of the participants in the study. I need a really long stick. In terms of the quantitative measures, we had 2 objectives. Firstly, there was this concern that we were using individuals from 4 different countries that have 4 different diagnostic procedures. And we wanted to make sure that all of the individuals in the project were similar in some way, came at a similar starting point. So this is one of the things that we wanted to do. And also we wanted to provide a number of different techniques of evaluation. So overall we wanted a rich picture of what the project was achieving. So in terms of the quantitative measures, the number measures if you like, we use this thing called the autism quotient, which many of you I'm sure would have heard of. There'll be a fuller version of the research document available soon, so in terms of references and links to all of these tests, you'll be able to find that fairly soon. We also use this thing called the social communication questionnaire. This was only used at the beginning. The first 2 were really to ensure that all of our participants were relatively similar. We also use this thing called the social skills questionnaire and the friendship quotient, which is a measure developed by Simon Baron-Cohen and a variety of other people to kind of measure or quantify the quality and level of friendship relations that people have. And then finally we use this thing which is essentially a happiness scale. How happy are you? In terms of the qualitative measures, there was nothing really out there that would do what we wanted it to do. And so we developed a new questionnaire schedule to be used with the parents of some of the participants. We'll come back to this in a moment, but it was essentially 19 items covering many different aspects of the project, of relationships, of life in general. And it involved open-ended questions. So there was a question, a prompt, and then parents could speak freely. Responses were then coded for particular themes, and we'll come to those in a moment. So, the results to start with. Now, some of you will probably be very familiar with bars and charts, some of you won't be. All you really need to know is that this represents averages. So the autism quotient was, like I say, primarily used to make sure that we had similarity among our participants. As you can see over the 3 time periods, it dips slightly and then it goes back up a little bit. It doesn't really change in a significant way. We weren't really expecting it to change. It's not like we were expecting individuals to join the project and then leave 2 years later without having autism anymore. This was not what we were planning on. The change that we have in the middle there isn't significant, but if anything, it suggests that there is a slight dip in the middle of the project. What's more important, I think, is this measure of social skills. As you can see in time 1, we're down here, it peaks slightly here, and it's roughly the same here, maybe down just a tiny little bit. This is a questionnaire that's getting at people's capacity to interact, to actually engage with each other. And we've got to change in the right direction. Because of the small numbers, but it's a nice indication. As you can see, this measurement of happiness, we have this curious shape going on, but again, generally, over the course of the project, we've got a slight increase in people's general levels of happiness. Now, the next slide will probably amuse, shock, something new. In terms of friendship, this measure of people's quality of friendships, as you can see, we've got a straight line down. Probably not a significant change, but certainly a move downwards. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, this organisation have taken this money and have managed to make people less happy in terms of their friendships. No. What's really interesting, if you look at the data, we were very surprised by this, but if you look at the data in the original time span, as you can see, it's got a very long higher tail. And if you look at the individual cases, I think there is one individual in this first group who is scoring at 102 or 112, one of the two. Now, this is, I think, a level of quality of friendship that probably everyone in this room would aspire to. You know, we could maybe expect most of us to have a friendship score of about 100. 102, 112 is massively up there somewhere. So I think what's going on here is that the data is being enormously skewed to start with by individuals having unrealistic notions of what friendships are. We'll return to this in a moment because this is something that's borne out in qualitative interviews. I think what's going on during the course of the project, and where's Nature? We were having a discussion yesterday over dinner about how people, during the course of this project, people's perception of friendship has changed. And it's almost like one of the things that's happened over the last couple of years is that the participants have engaged with this notion of friendship and come to have a more realistic notion of what friendship involves and what can be expected. And this is kind of manifested as, I think, a more realistic measure. Yes. Okay, on to the qualitative measures. All of that's true. Okay, so what we did, we had these 19 items, and they were grouped, as I said a moment ago, into different themes, getting at different aspects of the project. And we conducted 5 or 6 interviews with a number of different parents, at least one person from each of the countries involved. So it involved one of the research assistants sitting down with one of the parents for an hour or so, going through the interview schedule and just allowing them to talk about the project, talk about their son or daughter, and talk about various aspects of what was going on. For those of you that are interested in the research process, what then happened, there were 3 of us who went through the interviews separately and looked for emerging themes among or amidst the dialogue that was present. And we've tried to represent these emerging themes and evidence them with quotations from the parents. So, the first set of issues was, we focused on what the parents' view was of the project before time 1. So all of this is talking to the parents. It's essentially sitting down and saying, think back to when the project was just about to begin. What were your thoughts? Generally, everyone was good and positive and hopeful about what the project might bring. You can see that I've got A, B, C, E, F, so on and so forth. Obviously, this data needs to be anonymised. So A will be one of the parents, B will be another parent. I'm just referring to these as A, B, C, D, E, and F. So I think for person A, the crucial thing is that this project offers a level of independence. You know, life so far had been this individual being taken to various places by the parents, and this was something just for him, not for the parents. So it offered this level of independence. B and C both talked about a great opportunity. E and F, good news, a good chance to socialise. I think it's important to sort of understand the context before the project. And I think what we get from this is that by and large, the parents were enthusiastic and hopeful about what might happen in the project. The second thing that we looked at was how the parents thought the individual felt about the project. Overall, again, generally good, but there were some concerns. Both parent A and E were talking about concerns over coping, which is kind of understandable. You know, this was, I think, an adventurous project, taking a bunch of people from 4 different places in Europe and organising these international conferences, organising international relations. Parent E puts it beautifully when they say it was about joy with worries, concerns about how he will deal with all of this. Parent E talked about the fact that their child had been recently diagnosed but didn't yet know, and there were concerns over how he's going to react to this new environment. So I think there was this kind of mixed feeling, or this sense of mixed feelings at the beginning. Items 3, 4 and 5 in the questionnaire are really getting at anticipating X being the participant, the individual, and how they'll deal with new places and new people. That's supposed to say people, I apologise. Overall, optimistic, certainly those which we would perhaps expect. Parent D talks about agitation and happiness. Parent F, nervous and anxious. So we're getting a similar kind of sense from a number of the parents. Parent A talks about the project involving a new experience that he'd have to make sense of himself. So you get this sense of an opportunity. You know, he's got to go out into the world, something's going to happen, and he's got to make sense of it. There were a number of other more specific issues, concerns about flying. These came up time and time again. But again, this idea of being highly anxious but wanting to do it. So the project, I think, did involve a struggle for some people at times. It involved challenges. Two different feelings together. Item 6 was looking specifically at Facebook. Now, we thought that Facebook would be, as Yanni was saying, a really great medium to sort of kickstart the project. And I think at the beginning, by and large, it probably was. People were interested in sort of making contact. I think over the course of the project, some people put greater time into Facebook than others, and I think some people neglected it slightly. So I think overall what we get is the sense that the Facebook element was not that great. One person in particular was incredibly enthusiastic and enjoyed it very much. What we get from a number of the others is that they engaged with the Facebook element because it was part of the deal. You know, I'm in this project, Facebook's part of the deal, so I do it, but I'm not really that into it. And so we move on to the conferences, the international conferences that Yanni was talking about. This is items 7 and 8. And these items really get at the best bits of the conferences, but also the biggest challenges. Overall, the feedback was very, very good. We had some really wonderful comments from parents here along the lines of it improved their son-daughter's self-esteem. Parent F said, you know, she opened herself up. Parent A talks about the fact that the conferences were his thing, involved his friends, involved a kind of kudos. Kudos is this notion of self-esteem. So it was something that, if you imagine the parents there saying, you know, this wasn't our thing, it was his. It was his project, these were his friends, his adventures. And this was obviously a big deal. B and C, both of those kids had issues with flying. And what we kind of got was this sense of pride regarding the fact that flying was a challenge, but they overcame it. Parent C saying, I'm proud of my daughter for overcoming her fears. But there were, of course, challenges. Parent D talks about the challenge of overload, new information, new people, new situations. And of course, these things can be challenging for all of us. Item 10 was looking at the short-term effects of the conference. So saying to the parents, okay, in the first few days after your son, daughter has returned from one of the international conferences, has anything changed? Do you notice any differences? We were very surprised by this, but overall there did seem to be some significant changes. Parent B talked about the fact that their son seemed proud of himself for being in these interesting places and able to manage with all of the travelling. Things that we may take for granted, that they managed, they handled, and they were feeling pride at the fact that they'd done this. Parent C talks about their child being more satisfied, more happy. Parent D talks about the fact that the changes are not major, but that he trusts his own potential more. Now, if you can affect things like this, getting an individual to actually have greater faith in their own potential, this is not a small thing. Parent F talking about more enthusiasm, more happiness. So that's the first few days after returning from conference. In terms of longer term changes, again, we see some significant things going on. Parent A talks about the fact that it's helped his confidence an awful lot. So the project seems to have not only given rise to greater independence, but also self-confidence. Parent B talks about being more open and starting conversations more often. Parent C, their daughter has grown on a personal level. She learned that there is no fear that she cannot overcome. This is a big thing. Parent F, talking again about their daughter, she's discovered that she can make changes in her life. Again, these are many things that we almost take for granted. These are things that you can't really teach. You can't sit down in a classroom and say, right, you can change your life if you try. These are things that come through experience, and I think probably the greatest strength of this project was the experience that it offered. We then decided to focus on changes in the relationship between the participant and their parent. Items 12 and 13. Overall, some were very good indeed. Parent C talks about the fact that the project has changed my behaviour and my communication with their child. I understand her better now, and she has a brighter future than I used to think. So it seems that not only has this project changed the participants, but it seems that we've had a longer lasting kind of knock-on effect, and it's perhaps changed the relationship between the participants and their parents. And this is, I think Yang would probably agree with me here, this is more than we ever hoped for, really. So this is fantastic news. Parent F talks about the fact that ACE made her talk more with us, and talking more helped us to understand her better. We never knew how alone and different she felt. Quote marks there, sorry. And what we get from the rest of the parents is this notion that the project enhanced what was already there. So where there was a good relationship, the ACE project made it better. Benefits for the parents. We thought we'd throw this in there just to see if there were any benefits for the parents. Obviously, the project was not designed for the benefit of parents, but given that we were sitting down for an hour and talking to these individuals, we thought we'd find out if anything at all. And there seem to be some good aspects to this as well. Parent A talks about the fact that it's given us time. Now, there are many people in this room. You possibly come from all different kinds of backgrounds. Many of you may have kids on the spectrum. And sometimes it can be challenging. And sometimes a little bit of space, a little bit of time can be incredibly beneficial. Parent B talks about the fact that his progress in communication and independence makes my life easier. This is good news. Parent D makes me feel more secure about the future. I think many parents feel very nervous and anxious about what the future is going to be like for their child. And so if we can change this even a little bit, then this is good news. We are getting towards the end now. Hang on, in there. Item 16 was looking at changes in how the participant feels about him or herself. So this is really getting to this notion of selfhood and whether being involved in the project has altered this at all. Again, we see some significant changes. Parent B talks about the fact that the individual involved is confident and knows more about his abilities. So this indicates that being involved in the project has given rise to levels of insight, levels of self-reflection. Parent C, she doesn't think of herself as being an idiot or a weirdo anymore. Now she thinks she's a bit different, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. This, I think, is a significant change. If we've taken an individual who thinks, they're an idiot or a weirdo, and taken them to a place where they think, well, no, I'm not. I'm just different. And being different's good. Then this is a big deal. Parent F talks about the fact their daughter trusts herself more and also has more courage to interact with people. There is a lot more detail. As you can imagine, these interviews are quite in-depth. I've just tried to pull out some of the main themes and some of the main aspects of evidence. I could probably happily talk for 3 or 4 hours on the content of the interview, but I'm not going to force that on you. But you can read it at a later date if you want. In terms of a summary, excuse me, what we get from the number data, I think, is a very mixed message. But this is partly because it's a relatively small sample. And I think it does give rise to a number of interesting issues, especially about the perception of friendship. We get overall much more in terms of positive indications from the words, from the interviews. And in some cases, as I've said, we seem to have significant effects involving self-esteem and relationships with others in the family. Now the next slide is a bit of a horrible one, as you just saw there. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read it. I don't know if you want to sort of read out in translation and then sort of give me a wave when you're done. I wanted to include this. This is an extended part of one of the interviews with one of the parents, and I just think it captures what we aspired to so well, that despite the fact that it looks horrible and there's too many words, I wanted to include it. So I'll give you a few minutes to read this. Good work. And I think really that's a great note to end on. So I just want to say thank you to the ACE participants, because filling in these questionnaires is not exactly anyone's idea of fun. We do understand this. To the partners, also to the parents for being willing to sort of talk to us. And I want to say a little thank you to my long-suffering research assistant, and also the one that isn't here from Cambridge, for helping with the coding of the questionnaires, etc. Thank you.